Hello and welcome to Accidental Origin. Not well, we are an Accidental Origin, but this is Read Write Book Club. I've already goofed it up. This month, live from our studio in Ottawa, it's me, Sam, aka MC Pepper Pockets. My co-host Brendan.
Hello, aka Accidental Oregon, aka Accidental Oregon,
Accidental Origin,
aka Accidental Origin, aka Cosmic Sword, aka Peace Million, yada yada yada, etc.
Yep, and our guest returning this week, Erica Erica Cotton.
Ha ha! Haven't heard that before.
Ha! Oh.
Also, just Erica Cotton. I'm Erica Cotton of everything. I'm not strange people with different names.
Nope. I'm changing my legal name to MC Pepper Pockets anytime now, so it'll be easier for branding.
I'm so proud of you, Sam. Taking that leap.
Doing it. I'm going full Twitch name. Yeah, I'm going to be verified on Twitter because it'll be easy. Same name. Yeah, so this episode we're going to be talking about the middle chunk of Moby Dick. Mm-hmm. Turns out Moby is in fact a dick. Confirmed.
Accurate.
So I guess we can go over kind of a real quick summary of the first part. I think.
Yeah. Sure.
If you want.
Sure. So the first part of Moby Dick was basically just we have our main character who goes by the name Ishmael. He wants to go whaling because he's depressed. So he hooks up with a cannibal named Queequeg and heads out to get himself on a whaling boat, and does. The whaling boat's called the Pequod. It's captained by Ahab, who is a crazy person.
Hey, we didn't know that yet.
Yeah, we didn't know that last time, technically.
That's all I got. That's pretty much the summary of the
first
part. There was some beautiful man-on-man cuddling happening.
Yes.
There was a lot of cuddling, both on land and at sea.
Yes, and there was what else? There was just a lot of strange textbooky chapters that were just us learning about whales, and that continued in this section.
And also from just a purely geographic perspective, we went from the east coast of the United States down to the southern Atlantic. And at the beginning of this part, we're just about to go around the Cape of Good Hope, around the tip of South Africa.
Yeah, Cape Horn, right?
South America. He meant to say South America.
No. I'm pretty sure we're going actually, based on the way they describe it, pretty sure they actually do go around South Africa. Because even though they talk about Cape Horn, which is South America, in this chunk, they go around South Africa into the Indian Ocean and then through the Straits of whatever between Java and the other island.
I thought
Sumatra.
they were talking about. I thought that was when they were talking about the other ship. The other ship was saying that's where they went. I thought they came.
No, well, they met them there. They were both were going opposite ways, and they kind of crossed paths.
Well, now I'm.
But it's not. It's kind of ambiguous. You're not wrong. I was confused until the end, and then I started I went back through it, and I kind of drew myself a little map of where they said they were, and there's no way, given the direction they say they're going, that they could have gone any other way.
I just remember them talking about Japan, being in Japan for the whaling season, so I assume.
Yeah, so that's where they're going. So here, I drew a little map on a sticky note. So
I was.
If you look at this, you'll see
that
this is Africa, and they come up around this way, and then there's tons of whales in the Indian Ocean. They talk about at first, and then this is Sumatra is this one, and
right, Malaysia.
This is Java, and then they go up between those two islands, and that's the very end which we'll talk about, which is a pretty cool scene.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So for those who don't know, I am very weak at geography. So I thought that Cape Horn, which they talked about, was in Africa because I knew that they were going around Africa. But,
Well, yeah, they throw around a lot of geographic terminology.
Yeah. Well, I thought that I was good at geography, and I keep. To be fair, I did have a moment where I went, okay, they're talking about Sumatra right now. I'm a little confused because I immediately was picturing them the entire time going down Argentina, down Chile, and around that corner. So that's, I don't know, Now I'm like,
It probably is faster to go around Africa, though.
Yeah, and it's because of trade currents.
Yeah.
That's the way to go. As the wind and the water pulls you along, it's easier to
makes
go
sense.
in that direction than the other.
Yeah, that makes a lot more sense.
And actually, they even kind of talk about that because there's that chapter where Ishmael's talking about Ahab going over all his maps and trying to track down like where whales are most likely to be based on all these currents and shit.
Yeah.
And like they don't say that they're following those, but like
Right.
obviously if they're following the whales, they got to follow those currents.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense, right? That the whales, like that animals in general, follow the natural currents and the seasons for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Just like any animal, a whale is pretty instinctual. It's got a lot of. They don't build a lot of stuff the way we do, so they just kind of do the same thing over and over again.
Yeah.
And actually, that's kind of interesting. They get into that a little bit. That whales are basically animals, but that like they're alarmingly intelligent for animals.
Yeah.
So like one of the early chapters is all about like, do whales take vengeance?
Yeah.
Yeah, and basically the conclusion was yes, they definitely do. They will come and mess you up if you cross them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I thought there was a lot of interesting examination of like whale psychology.
I think the interesting point, like sort of one of the interesting aspects of this book is how much it delves into the scientific, and then to contrast that, how much it delves into the metaphysical and how it describes these whales. So the author spends a lot of time like educating us about what whales are really like, but at the same time like always paints them as like this mystic, unknowable thing.
Yeah, there is an interesting contrast. Well, it's like a search for knowledge that you can never quite achieve.
Yeah.
Sort of is what it feels like.
To an extent, yeah.
But I guess like the whale is, I mean, it represents obviously a lot of things in this book, but like the sea is kind of this unknowable thing. But the whale is kind of like man if he were at sea and like lived in the ocean. It's like the ultimate whale man. Because there's a lot of discussion about what is a true whaler in this part as well.
Yeah. And a lot,
like, I
and
think
a lot
the
of
truest
Ishmael,
whaler is a whale.
A lot of Ishmael trying to sell us on why whalers are cooler than everybody else all the time, no matter what they're doing, because they make so much more sense and they're so much more sensible and rigorous and strong and important than any other person on the sea at any moment in time ever.
And especially American whalemen. Nobody should even worry about those British jerks.
Yeah, they kept like he kept saying how superior.
To be honest,
the American whalers were.
The English, like the European whale fleets, were significantly smaller in size to the American whale fleets. So.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, they'd they'd killed most of the whales in the North Atlantic and consumed them by that point. So they had to go, that's why they were in the Pacific so much. But I did love the varying impressions of the different other ships that went by them. Like he has a whole spiel about the English, and then they have a really interesting conversation with, I think it was the Spanish sailors.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Portuguese.
Yeah.
I think they were Spanish.
I think it was Spanish. Yeah.
So like the whole steel kilt story, what the hell was that?
I don't know what that was. I was kind of annoyed because I was like judging to help myself get through. Every time I would start a new chapter, I'd check like how many minutes are in the audiobook, and I was like, this chapter is a fucking hour long. All right, it's pretty good. And it's literally like them fucking telling us a story about some people that I didn't have any connection to at all.
I know.
You know what the best part of that
for...
story is? It's actually a framing narrative inside a framing narrative.
Yep.
With another story in the middle, and you're just like,
I'm sorry, wait, for us laymen, what does that mean? I don't know what that means.
It means that
framing story. I don't know.
It's someone telling a story, and then the characters within that story are themselves telling a further story, and the characters in that second deep story are also telling a story, and that's the one that we were hearing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because it was
It's like
it was
so many layers.
Ishmael telling the reader a story, and then in the middle of that story, he tells a story about the time he told the story to somebody else in which he was telling the story.
Right. Which,
And it's just like,
what the hell?
why? Why are you doing this?
Yeah, and like I wasn't. I got like the steel kilt thing was all about like the crew versus captain dynamic.
Yeah.
How that was supposed to relate to what we were experiencing,
Yeah.
because it was a pretty different scenario. Excuse me.
Yeah, for what it's worth, as crazy as Ishmael is, he does sound like a really competent and good captain in general, compared to a lot of these other guys. Or
You
sorry,
mean Ahab?
Sorry, Ahab, yes.
Yeah.
I meant Ahab.
Yeah, he's a little bit crazy, but he runs a tight ship. That's definitely true.
Yeah. For sure.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, so I don't know. I thought that was an interesting, yeah, like you said, Brendan, like an interesting narrative device, but it didn't have a lot of content in it.
Yeah, like the only thing I got, it was how in awe the Spanish nobles were of the whalers, and it was just like another like, oh, you're just trying to sell me on why whalers are cool again. I don't know if I care.
Make the sea great again.
Yeah.
Oh no, what have I done? Yeah, so that was interesting.
Oh,
So
I also,
actually, all of the. Sorry, go ahead.
I really liked the part where he told me that narwhals weren't real. That was a great part. I thought that was hilarious.
Well, when did he say that? Because he talks during the first section. He talked about narwhals being real.
Yeah, in the
He was just saying. Go ahead.
well, in the second part, it's when he's talking about it. He's like, yeah, this one book that isn't very scientifically accurate describes something called a narwhal, which is ludicrous. It's like a unicorn. It doesn't exist. And I was just like,
Okay, yeah.
are you sure?
Well, they say a lot of weird things.
Well, I mean,
so,
it's hard for us to judge considering our more advanced scientific knowledge of
Right.
of whaling so far, right?
So here's a scientific question that I should have looked up but didn't. At one point, he talks about when they stab the whale and like the way it bleeds out. He says like a lot of animals have valved blood vessels so that they can't bleed out. Is that true? That doesn't sound true.
I think that he was. It didn't sound accurate to me. I think he was essentially just talking about clotting, and I think
Yeah.
that whales don't have like less
Yeah.
clotting abilities.
Oh, maybe that's it. Maybe it's yeah.
I could see that though because because they probably have fairly thin blood. Otherwise,
Based on what?
because it would increase their buoyancy if it was thinner.
Oh, maybe. Oh, you're actually. Well, that's a blood gas. Anyway, it doesn't matter. That's we're delving down a.
Yeah, I don't know.
hole
I'm just
there.
saying like that's what I think. Like I think they would have thinner blood and
Possible.
therefore it wouldn't clot as well. So
Yeah, and given their like huge blubber and skin layer, it'd be pretty hard for them to get stabbed enough to lose significant blood.
yeah, and
would
they
think.
they also don't get cold very much because of the blubber and all that stuff as well.
Right.
So
Interesting. More whale science. Continued whale science. I have a lot of notes that begin with the word whale. Whale vengeance. We have whale danger. Whale danger, I think, is a big theme of the first half of this, was how dangerous whales are.
yeah, I would agree.
My favorite part was basically the chapter where Ish goes to each of the different main characters on the ship and is like, are whales going to kick our ass? And each of them says yes.
I love how you
Like-
nicknamed him. Ish, you know Ish, my friend Ish. He's just he's really cool.
He's cool. Him and Q, aka Queequeg. This is how I take my notes. I have become on a first name basis with these guys.
I literally only took notes of the things that I thought were hysterical.
A lot of funny things.
Yeah. Though there's one that I quoted. In man or fish, wriggling is a sign of inferiority. And I was like, really? That's like that's what it shows inferiority for you as a man looking at other men or as a human looking at other humans. Just wriggling, that's what essentially,
I
guess
saw
it
you
was like
wriggle.
a
You're
metaphor.
weak.
Yeah, you're so weak. Yeah. And then there was like another another like I feel like another sort of like homoerotic statement that I which I again quote but handle Queequeg's monkey rope heedfully as I would. Sometimes he jerked it so that I came very near sliding overboard, excuse me.
Wow.
There's a lot of jerking in that paragraph.
And I was like, that was one that's like my favorite scene in this whole bit was when Queequeg jumped in and saved Tashtigo.
Yeah.
When he went overboard, and you have Ishmael going, "My brave Queequeg dives in after to save him," and I was like, "My brave," like that's such a romantic thing to say. I feel like he
definitely described him as being hot at one point.
Like, yes,
he's just like, "Oh, he looks really good at this point, very healthy."
Wasn't that
and
when
strong.
He's standing at the prow of the whaleboat, right, with the spear?
Yeah.
And he's like, "Damn, look at that Queequeg."
Yeah, and he's like talking about how Queequeg lost his hat. Yeah. I remember it. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Oh, it's so good. They're like such good friends.
And
clearly nothing more.
Clearly nothing more. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm glad Queequeg came back though, because his the stuff that happens with him is always more interesting than the stuff that happens just to Ishmael.
I agree.
It's totally true. Well, Queequeg has got like balls of steel. That guy literally jumped into the ocean and cut open a sinking whale to save a man.
Right. Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
And it's the water is probably not warm at all as well. I feel like maybe it was, but not.
Oh, I don't know. At that point, I think they were in like the Indian Ocean, so it probably isn't that bad. But it's still not
wasn't freezing, but it's like it's never like
it's not great.
Yeah.
Also, you're inside a dead whale, so bad shit's happening already.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
So Tashtigo, when he fell in that whale, man, that was I thought that was interesting because it was the kind of end result of all that buildup of the mechanics of how they basically take a whale apart once they've killed it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the end, it was like, and also sometimes
this happens.
Things happen.
Yeah. I didn't think that he was how he wrote it. I didn't think that anyone was gonna save him. I thought it was like he was just gonna let him die and be like, all right.
To be honest,
this is the reality of what could happen.
They probably would have.
Right. Yeah.
Queequeg made a decision on his own to save him, and that was very heroic. But at the same time, like most other people in that time would not have done that. They would have let him die, and they would have sailed away and been, oh well, that's the job, you know.
Yeah, he died. Well, so what's really interesting about that is that having read like a lot of biographies of people in the 19th century, one of the things that is often an indicator of like someone being heroic is saving someone from drowning, because a lot of people were not good at swimming during that period, like most people.
And actually, to point in fact, a lot of sailors were not good at swimming either.
Yep. Exactly, because they had a boat. They didn't need to go in the water.
Right? But I mean...
So I thought that was really neat. Right. Well, yeah, it seems crazy today because we have like these kind of ubiquitous programs in most countries, or at least Canada and the United States, of like teaching children to at least basically swim. Mm-hmm. But at this time, there was nothing. Like if your parents didn't teach you, you weren't going to learn, or you'd learn on the job maybe.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, personally speaking, if I was working in a place where I knew that there was giant things of water that I could drown in, and there was a way to not do that, I feel like I would learn that thing. But
right,
just saying.
Erica, I don't know if it's just me, but I can't hear you.
Yeah, I
there you go.
had my mic muted because my dog is barking. There's a guy that's showing my third room in my apartment, so she's growling at them.
Okay, all right. It was just I could see you kind of muttering, and it's like I can't hear it.
I'm muttering, Luna, shut up. Luna, shut up.
Oh, good. Okay. All right. A little too much of how the sausage is made during this episode, apparently. Yeah. So, what else? What was the next thing that we wanted to kind of touch on?
I mean, There's a lot of textbook talk. I'm just like,
Yeah.
I feel like my impression so far of the first 2/3 we read is just like, can we just make this about story? I really don't give a fuck about like the nuances of the flukes of a whale tale. Like, I really don't care. I didn't buy this to learn about whaling. I learned, that's, I don't know if that's what like Melville thought in the day that he wanted to like, just like show that he knows things. I don't know. Like, I just don't understand. It's a little frustrating.
I was definitely frustrated a little bit about like, because every time one of those chapters ended, Melville would just be like, and now that I've proved this thing unabashedly to you, you must now definitely see that my point is valid and must be accurate. And I'm just like, you didn't even present me a logical argument. You just told me a bunch of stuff and hoped that I followed along. Like, I don't.
Well, he presents a lot of like data and says like, well, given this information that I present as true, then you must come to this certain conclusion.
I was like, what?
Yeah, I just don't want to. I'm sorry. I'm like not someone that's intrigued by academic paper readings.
To be fair, to be completely fair, this is much better written than most academic papers. It is not completely dry. There's a lot of good language in here that is interesting, but yes.
Would you say all of the language that is interesting are the pieces about Ishmael and the storyline? You know what I mean?
No, I was saying that like Melville has a very poetic turn of phrase, even when he's describing academic subjects.
Okay. Well, I don't know if I have that. I don't know if I have the knowledge to support that opinion with my own. I don't know.
Keep an eye out for like the way he uses alliteration all the time. Like, it's constant and it's impressive, and like he would have to work to do that. It's not, unless he's the greatest rhyme master in the world. Like, I don't know, that shit doesn't just happen on its own. So it is definitely super well written, like in that sense. But I feel like if I were editing this today, about 2/3 of it would have been cut out, and it would have been all those whale science chunks. Because the story is cool about them going around the world and kicking whale ass, but like I don't, like you said, I don't need to know about the striations in a whale's muscle tissue.
Yeah,
like, that's too much detail.
You know what else is too much detail? Knowing that whale's milk goes with strawberries. That was too much detail. I wanted to vomit.
I was so mad. I was so mad when your man was just like, steak should be tough, and I'm just like, you're ruining the best steak in the world, dude. You're ruining it.
Steak.
That was weird. Yeah.
You have this perfectly cooked rare steak that your cook thinks is amazing, and you're just like, it's not tough enough. I'm like, oh no.
Well, and so that part was real weird because they start like really digging into the ship's cook.
Yeah, and forcing him to speak to the sharks. Like, I didn't understand that at all. And he was like using it as like a metaphor for being a good Christian person by not, I don't know. That was really, I was very strange. It was very strange.
That was weird because he doesn't ever mention American slavery, but I guarantee you that guy, that black cook dude, either escaped slave or like manumitted or something like that. Like the way that he responds to them is super like passive aggressive.
Yeah, and he called him cook.
Yeah,
I don't think that's completely uncommon.
I think it's a race politics thing that he's trying to put in there real subtly. I think.
I just
this is pre-Civil War.
Well, yeah, I was just gonna say that I think contemporary time period wise, calling the cook is not that.
No, that's not that weird.
Like that's a thing that people do.
Well, another thing that I don't know about. So.
Yeah, and since
I don't think it's that
accent. Weird. The accent in my audiobook, he definitely did like a southern twang that I thought was like spot on.
Oh,
sure,
mine
like,
was not southern. It was more like eastern, like Far East, East Asia.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I thought it was really interesting that like the shark metaphor was like a metaphor for humanity, right?
Yeah,
like people being sharks.
Uncle Tom is what that guy was, just definitely like because he was the slave that's going along with the program and kind of helping them with it.
Yeah.
But anyway, Yeah, so the sharks as people for sure, even as competing whale boats.
Yeah.
Because like, as we discover as they go along, like they keep bumping into these other whalers, and like at first when they're not actually on the whale grounds, it's all good, and they go over and they have like rum and dinner and whatever. But then as they actually get to the whaling grounds, it becomes a little more tense.
Yeah, but none of those whalers
Yeah.
are as good as the Nantucketers because they're not from
No, of course
Nantucket.
Exactly.
I didn't even pick up on the metaphor.
Oh yeah, well, the
Tell me about it.
swarming and biting is just like all over the place.
Yeah,
Right.
It was a very much a sort of. It felt to me like a big description of kind of like a, in a sense, a church congregation, which was the more obvious part, but just more about a general commentary about humanity in general, and sort of the effects on religion on humanity.
Well, I think it's also a comparison between the whalers and the sharks,
Yeah.
right? Because they're both doing the same thing. They're going out and just devouring these carcasses to feed their own thing, and it can't last forever.
Yeah.
Makes sense. So that was kind of grim.
Yeah. Yeah. for sure.
So that the shark thing came up after they had captured that whale, and that was kind of the end point of I thought of Melville going over like the mechanical components of how whaling actually works.
Yeah.
So like and that it gets pretty gruesome.
Yep.
So I don't know if we really want to go over like the way they attach all the chains and like strip out chunks and all that.
Having seen that, like I was talking about this last episode, but like I've seen what those chunks look like in a museum, and it is gross.
Oh yeah,
It is very.
they're
gross.
like bedsheet size chunks of flesh.
Yeah, they're like a really thick mattress pad sort of thing. Like they're like sort of this thick, right? Like this thick at least, and that's just the outer strip. Like it's crazy.
Yeah. So I thought that was pretty interesting that the way that they can like they kill the whale by like stabbing it, and then they kind of string it up and have it sort of next to the boat. Like there's this almost they become this like almost like oil rig kind of situation where they got cranes and crap.
How did you pictured it as a vertical stringing? Because I thought they were saying that they sort of strung it to the side of the boat, the lengthwise of the boat, where it sort of. I guess maybe I'm
Well,
my perception could be incorrect, but that's what it seemed like to me.
I thought they were kind of like two steps. But first was when, like you said, they pull it up next to the boat
Right.
and lash it in with the flukes. But then they describe chopping the head off.
Right, when the head comes off, I remember them saying that was they literally had it strung up, after the fact.
Yeah, that's more what I meant was
okay.
them taking that off and having that kind of up out of the water so that it's not consumed by the sharks, and then they can take all the oil out of it.
Keep in mind that the deck
Yeah.
would have been far above the water level on this kind of boat, right? Well, it would have been farther up, right?
I'm still a little unclear on how big this boat is. but
Yeah,
I don't think
same.
it's huge.
Right, but I'm just saying, like the boat was like the deck of the boat is several feet above the water level, so rising
Yes.
it up at least a bit so that they have easier access to it makes a lot of sense.
Well, and it means because I think they talk about the whale's head being like 20 feet long or something like that. So that means that they can raise this thing at least 20 feet out of the water.
Yeah.
The dentistry description. I don't remember what the dentistry description was. Was that when they were taking
Talking about
the whale bone out?
the pulling the jawbone out. Yeah.
Oh, right. Yeah. That. Oh, God. And the
I think that's
huge,
what
the sharp spades that they jam into the gums to pry
Yeah.
out the.
Yeah, when Queequeg just went right in and it was just like literally like shaving the gums off. It was, yeah.
That was messed up, actually. Yes, that was real gross. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, whale's teeth are pretty valuable.
I think I was less grossed out than I thought I was gonna be, to be honest. The only thing that I was grossed out was like when who was it? Was it Starbuck? I don't know. What they had like someone was like the initiate, basically the initiate of the killing, and it was like, and then he stuck it right through into the heart, and now the whale was dead, and I was like, oh my God, you like what I just like I couldn't fathom, even though that they were describing the process, I couldn't fathom the process of like going through. I don't know. I couldn't. What's the word? I couldn't glean from like what they were saying, how deep the heart was from what side and where the side, what you know, which side they were coming in from. I thought I needed like more information to be more grossed out, but that's as far as I could get. Was where I was like, all right, just stabbed him right in the heart. It's all right.
Just jam it right in there.
Yeah. I think I don't know. Maybe my exposure to video media has numbed my ability to be as grossed out by reading something, maybe.
That's an interesting perspective, because like we get exposed to so much violence in media these days, like blood and gore, but then like at the time in the 19th century, the world was a pretty brutal place, so like they would have been pretty accustomed to death, but I don't know whether like that day-to-day gore would have been part of it. So this kind of lands in the middle there, like it's where like both of us can be, both sides of that time gap can be kind of horrified in different ways.
Yeah, I would agree, awful. because like when we talk about like them just leaving Tachiko to die and like all that kind of stuff, like that was a very common thing. Like they would have been very used to that society.
Yeah.
So,
How do I... There we go. Well, that was weird.
Trolls,
but giving money.
Yeah.
So, what else you got in your notes there, Sam?
Yeah, so we did the whale slaughter. I thought there was some interesting... Yeah, we talked about the whale anatomy a little bit, which was interesting, because there were a couple things that I didn't really think about. For example, like the size of the whale brain. There's a whole chapter on that. The nut. Gotta get that whale nut.
Yeah, and how it makes like a nice hearty meal.
Yeah, delicious whale brain, but that it's real small. Like he says it's like a foot or 2 feet across for this whale that's 100 feet long. And I thought what was really interesting was him getting into the mechanics of like, how could such a huge animal have such a small brain? But then he starts looking at the spine and he's like, well, the spine is like a bunch of little brains.
Oh yeah, he was like calling the spine like the holy organ compared in terms of the whale, at least, which I found intriguing.
I thought that was a really interesting take on like the brain to body mass ratio kind of thing, which they were not. I don't know. Maybe they were thinking about that in the 19th century, but I certainly didn't.
He was talking about it in terms of a bunch of pseudosciences, which we no longer support.
Right.
It's true.
That's
just talking about phrenology a lot.
Yeah. I struggled with that a lot, where
phrenology was widely accepted for a long time.
Right. I struggled reading this part. I think most like. If I'm reading something like nonfiction where I'm learning something, hypothetically reading a nonfiction book about whaling, like, or whales, it's in general, I feel as though the fact that the science is basically majority of what he was talking about is like sort of like a lot of it is completely not true anymore, and it's not accepted as truth, not accepted as fact, and that's what got me to the point where I was like, I'm done with this, because I'm learning about what he thinks is the real thing in 1851 when it's not, and he's talking about how intelligent he is when it's literally based on nothing. So it's like, I don't know. I think that's what I struggled so much with, like reading all the textbooky chapters. I don't know.
So I feel like that's a common complaint when people read like historical documents, but what you should be taking away from it, or like I guess a more constructive way to like look at it is not I'm learning something that I know is not true, but that you're learning the perspective of those people of that time period. You're learning not about the facts, but about what they thought the facts were and why they thought the facts were. So we see a lot of like Bible allegories in this, and that kind of occludes the real facts, because they constantly make these assumptions that like, oh well, the Bible said this, so that must be true, even when at times Ishmael is like, well, the Bible says fish or whales are fish, and so I accept that, even though there's like all this science that says they're not fish.
Mm-hmm.
So really, it's telling us more about the preconceptions and biases that they had during that time period, than just giving us bad facts.
Right. I guess I sound like an asshole when I was saying that, but I just mean like, I got it. It was the amount of information. Like I can understand comparing knowledge then and now. I understand like understanding the perception of what that person was understanding at the time. Learning where they were at. But I just think that it was so much of it that I got to a point where I was just like, I feel like a little exhausted mentally by it. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Like, fair point though. I should stop being an asshole.
No, and that wasn't really my point.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't. I that was me. That was me interpreting in my brain. It's all good. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, like I don't know. That's my natural like history nerdism of like, oh, you're looking at the thing that there's more interesting stuff that you could get out of that.
Yeah.
So that was really interesting. I don't know what that best parlays into though. Yeah, like the whale science. Like I said in chat there, they knew an alarming amount about these whales, like blood oxygenation and stuff. There's that whole chapter about them like storing up oxygenated blood. But at the same time, they don't know whether they're whales or like whether they're fish or mammals.
Yeah, that's true. It's intriguing the volume of knowledge they have about certain things and the lack of knowledge they have about others. Yeah.
Yeah, it was because they were like really just finally getting into like the nitty-gritty of how the world actually works. They were finally getting at chemistry and science and like, oh shit, we can actually examine in a numerical way how this stuff works and not just kind of guess and hope and maybe like burn a chunk of fat and like, oh well, this one burns blue instead of red and I don't know why.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we start to see, and we saw that really right at the beginning of the book as well, right, where he was talking about how explorers cured scurvy and all that kind of thing.
Yeah,
where he's presenting scientific experiments to us in a very rudimentary way.
Absolutely, and it's very much and what I would say that tells you about their society is that they're struggling with that the new ability to quantify information through the scientific method, and he's presenting that as kind of a thing that is coming up against this more traditional or like cultural knowledge that's been handed down through such a long period of time.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the stuff that they have about anatomical and physical knowledge just comes from having to cut something up. Like you spend that much time dissecting something, you learn what parts are good and what parts are bad, and like what you can use and what you can't, and people will try weird things with whatever's left over. And
yeah, that's what I found intriguing as well. Is like, I feel like just because there isn't the internet, there isn't like, you can't have a breadth of knowledge of everything. So you're as a whaleman, Ishmael probably knew the amount of knowledge that he had specifically on whaling was really dramatic compared to any other given person that you could like talk to today that is maybe looked at a handful of articles on whaling on the internet. Like I feel like it's strange to think that you can have such a difference from time periods, because we have a wide breadth from the internet, whereas like everyone else like back in the day was just like you just specialized in your one knowledge, you just became an expert at that one thing because that was easiest for you.
And I think that ties back into something that Stitzel was saying earlier when she asked like, how do you think this book would look like today if it was published today in a modern context? And I actually think that this book would do really, really well as a hyperlinked ebook where you could have interesting scientific repositories and link to those things without really necessarily distracting from the narrative.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like just even links to some Wikipedia article would be pretty fascinating.
Right. Where you can include those elements, but without having to necessarily distract them to distract from the overall narrative, like you were saying, Sam. Where like a good editor would have cut this book by like half, and it would have been better.
Yeah.
Well, you can have both in a more modern context.
Yeah. That would be awesome. Actually, I don't know if you've ever played Crusader Kings, Brennan.
No,
The
but
Paradox
I'm very
interactive game?
familiar with it.
Right. So one of the neat things that they did in the most recent iteration of that game was with any of the historical start dates, there's a link to the Wikipedia article on those historical people.
Nice.
So
Oh,
you don't have to go in blind. You go into the game and it's like, oh, this is some arbitrary king of England. Well, who the hell was that? And you click the button and it tells you who the hell that was in real life.
Yeah, and
That's awesome.
I think learning in that manner would actually be extremely helpful for a book like this. Especially, one of my favorite parts was the part about different paintings and sculptures of whaling over time, and like I would really have liked to have had the chance to look up those paintings and see what they actually look like, because I assume that they're all real paintings. He did just make them up.
He definitely was talking about real paintings. I loved his description of the French as the best painters of action.
Right. Yeah. He makes a lot of racial distinctions about who's good at what in general.
Yeah, well, that was a big thing at the time. 19th century was all about that race politics.
Yeah.
Oh man, I want to watch the game show Modern Science with Melville. or sorry, Modern Science or Melville. A different yet also interesting show.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is related, but the thing that I was intrigued by that it was different was just the way that the English language is different, because I can't tell you the last book that I read that was published pre 1900, so I think that I've just had very modern exposure to English, and so I was like, the fact that they spelled the word connection with an X was very confusing to me. I was like, oh, that's weird. And then like the cultural changes, so like spelling Hindu with 2 O's instead with a U, and what was the other one that I was like, that was weird. Just like calling Malaysian people Malays. They kept saying the Malays, and I thought that was intriguing. I don't know.
I don't know if they do it in this book, but calling Muslims Mohammedans.
Oh, geez,
Sure
I didn't know that was a thing. Oh, wow.
Oh, that was the standard way in Europe to refer to a Muslim at the time.
Wow. Yeah, I don't have any context there, so that's intriguing. Wow.
Yeah, so like definitely very different like proper nouns for things. That's changed significantly.
Mm-hmm.
So that actually brings us to a really interesting point. The Ahab's boat and crew of potentially Filipino dudes.
Yeah.
But they're super ambiguous about who they are. They're like ambiguously Asian.
Mm-hmm.
I think the only thing, like the only sort of, the only real clue we have about anything is that the leader of that crew wears a turban, right?
Yeah, so he's probably Sikh, but we don't know that for sure because Melvin probably doesn't know that for sure either.
Yeah, I thought I heard a reference to Moorish figures at some point, which would make a lot of sense.
Well, yeah, but that would have been, like, in the 19th century, that would have been almost anyone who was brown.
Right.
And at sea.
I'm sorry, what word are you using? Moorish?
Yeah.
Moorish. So, like, someone from North Africa, like Algeria or Tunisia.
Yeah.
Can you type it out for me?
Yeah.
Moorish.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right, that's more phonetic than I was expecting. All right, sounds good.
Yeah.
Never heard that term, so.
Well, the most important reference I've heard it used is Othello was a Moor.
The moops.
The moops.
It was the moops. It spelled the moops on the card.
So yeah. But I think that would be accurate with your idea of Sikh or Arabic with a turban.
Yeah. But it kind of doesn't matter because we don't see him that much, and he only says like 1 or 2 words.
Well, he's supposed to be the devil, right?
Oh yeah, the devil who lives in the bottom of the boat. I forgot about that. Yeah. That's true.
Hides his tail. That's why he sleeps on a coil of rope so he can put his tail in it and hide it away. It's not because there's no hammocks.
Yeah, so I thought that was really interesting that he has this like secret crew of devils that he spawns up like whenever he wants to go out and fight the whale. You know, like Do you have any thoughts on these guys that are basically not part of the plot but just materialize?
Yeah, it was really interesting because they're kind of like a group of elite mercenary soldiers in a way that he has just stashed away to take care of one specific enemy.
Well, and I thought it was interesting how much he describes them as like being way better at, like much faster than the other whalers. You know, like they start last and they end up way ahead.
Mm-hmm.
Where they're chasing the whale.
Yeah.
Yeah, like they have almost supernatural strength, which is, I think, very much on purpose because they're like these extraplanar demons from hell.
Yeah.
Or the Philippines, depends on what you feel like that day, or what the author's, how racist he's feeling on that chapter.
But I think that, like, I mean, that kind of makes sense, right? Like, that's the whole reason why Ahab hired them, right? Because they're good at what they do. Or you'd think that's why he hired them?
I thought so. What I thought was a little weird is that given like the makeup of the rest of the crew, that's kind of people from all over the place. I don't really get why they're kept that separately. Like from a real world perspective, I get from a narrative perspective what they're meant to be separate and apart. And Ahab is always isolating himself, but like real world wise, it just seems very odd.
Yeah. Especially because we know for a fact that there's definitely Native Americans, African Americans, and a bunch of other different skin types in that crew. So it's not like they wouldn't fit in, I don't think.
Exactly. And they're clearly competent sailors.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. Yeah, I thought it was interesting just like because it was so different from the rest of the way he portrays the crew.
Yeah, I almost think it's like kind of like they keep to themselves sort of thing, and the whole like hiding them until the critical moment, right? Like that's sort of like they were below deck until a whale was sighted, and then they were just there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and on that point, there are not a lot of female characters in this book.
Yeah, that's true.
No. Are there any?
A couple of widows.
Right.
The what was her name? Not Sissy. What was it? The chick from the.
Oh yeah. The owner's sister.
Yeah.
Who gave him the ginger.
Oh right.
I forget her name. It was something SSY. I can't. Whatever I don't know. Yeah, she's the only one I remember.
Anyway, there was the two innkeepers at the beginning.
Right.
Two proprietors. There was the sister, and then
we definitely didn't have. I don't think we had any in this third, right?
Then, they were all in the first part. They do reference several more widows this time, and wives.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
They also they talk about Ahab being married,
mm-hmm.
but like the wife doesn't even get a name.
Yeah.
Which
women are unimportant at this
time.
Well,
I was just thinking of that letter, that letter that dead sailor got, that they gave to the guy, and they're like, his wife and child back home. It's probably from her.
I had a thought that when I was reading that it felt like he was lying, like he was using it as a ploy to like, push his. What's the word? Agenda on the other people. Like he sort of like reached out and it's for so and so who happens to be the person that just died. I feel like it felt really coincidental to me, and that he was like, let me just read it for you. I felt like that's like it seemed as though he was being like deceitful. I don't know. That's where I.
Yeah. It sure felt weird. The way they're just kind of passing that letter back and forth, like, don't worry, this is a third party's thing, but we're gonna go over it just real quick to make sure it gets to the right person.
Yeah, exactly.
That prophet didn't want them to take it, and like a bunch of other stuff.
Yeah, that guy was weird. Prophet, the guy claiming to be Gabriel, like, it's like what? Yeah. And there were people just like, all right, you sound legit. I'm definitely gonna follow. You're clearly the Gabriel, the archangel. I'm into it.
I feel like the guy just got cabin fever. They all just started listening to him.
Yeah.
I put something out there that's maybe really obvious, but like he was a prophet, of profit, and that's what they're all after is money. Just saying. That they're all pursuing fanatically the profit from the sea.
It's a good point.
I have to tell you, I'm going to be honest, and that went over my head. I don't know what you mean. I'm sorry.
I didn't
The word
think about
profit
that
is in
either.
making extra money versus profit as a seer or
profit with an F. Okay. I heard it twice. I heard it twice as profit, like the PH profit, and I got confused. But the good point.
Right.
All right. That's a good point. All right.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like it's real subtle but simultaneously super obvious. And when I listened to it, I don't think I got it as much as reading it. Because I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
No, I can see
more
why. Yeah, well, when you're reading it or when you're listening to it, you just kind of hear the words, right? And they sound the same. Where
Right.
when you're looking at it,
Yeah,
it
the
jogs
homonym.
that. That is intriguing.
Because a lot of this, in fact, there's a very early chapter about how, like, after Ahab gives a series of speeches, he kind of keeps having to reinforce that because people keep going back to their natural inclination of this is just a job and I'm here for money. And so I felt like that theme kind of keeps getting reinforced even through the like constant like religious imagery as well.
Yeah, there is a lot of religious imagery for sure, and it was really interesting to hear Ishmael kind of talk about the idea of religious figures and all that being about whales, like the dragon from St. George and the Dragon is actually a whale, and he made a really interesting point about the here be dragons thing, which I thought was really neat. That I hadn't really considered before, but that's very true. When you look at old school maps, they say here be dragons, and they have pictures of whales in the middle of nowhere and all that stuff very similarly. That is very interesting.
Yeah, I found that intriguing as well. And then him referencing more about, the Hindu religion.
Yeah.
And talking about Vishnu. Yeah.
Yeah.
I do. The only thing I took, so I took a couple notes from that, just a list of all the characters that he referenced as being like historical sweet whalers. And the only thing I wrote down for Vishnu was Vishnu loves whales, and I don't remember why.
I don't recall either, to be honest.
I
think I remember him talking about something about there was a deity that had half of the body of a whale.
Okay.
I feel like I recall that. I don't know.
That sounds right.
Yeah.
That sounds right.
I could believe that if I were Hindu.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I thought intriguing as well. So ditto, Brendan.
Yeah.
Like even I loved how he kind of went through all of history and is like, yo, but what if this monster was a whale? What if this monster was a whale? What if they were all whales? What if all monsters are whales? St. George fought a dragon? What if it was a whale, though? The scarier monster.
Yeah, he kind of.
And by the way, I've killed whales, so just saying.
The Hobbit was actually written about a whale. Tolkien knew what he was doing.
Whale.
Yeah, that's was one of the large parts of sort of the idea that I got from him of like, yeah, whalers are badass. We're really cool. Stop looking down on us, guys. We're really cool. I'm telling you, we're really cool.
He says it so much. How cool they are.
And like at a point, like I kind of wonder, like,
a sky whale.
Well, is that Ishmael or is that Melville just being in love with the idea of whaling?
That's where I am confused. Not confused, but intrigued by. Like, I don't know where Melville stops and where Ishmael begins. Like, I feel as though, yes, Ishmael is the name of the character, but I feel as though we rarely hear Ishmael's name to the point where I'm just like hearing it as if I'm learning Melville's experiences, because there's so much textbook, like nonfiction material in it that it feels like he's speaking non-fictionally, that's not a word, but whatever, about himself, about his own experiences, even though it's supposed to be Ishmael. I don't know. That's what I felt too.
Yeah.
Well, that line seems really ambiguous.
What line?
Honestly, the line between the character and the author.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I thought we were quoting something.
Well, he's like, and there's a reason
No.
Ishmael is only named once, right?
Right.
In the entire book.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, well, there's a couple people there's characters that call him out and say his name. once or
Mainly
twice.
Queequeg.
Yeah, mainly Queequeg. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Because
we've
they're
also
butts.
talked about, like Stitsville had pointed out, that we're pretty sure that that Melville and Hemingway was it Hemingway?
Hawthorne.
It wasn't Hemingway.
Hawthorne.
Yeah,
Which one? Sorry. I mixed up H writers. Kill me. Okay.
Similar.
Yeah. Hawthorne and Melville were like lovers or something of that sort. So I feel like
Naturally.
that's it's possible, right? I don't know.
Yeah.
So was the Leviathan a whale, or was that a squid monster? Have we decided this?
Oh, the ghostly thing?
No,
Or
it's because
the him referring to the Leviathan.
him referring to the Leviathan. He refers to whales as Leviathans, but he specifically talks about Perseus and Andromeda, where Perseus saves Andromeda from the Leviathan, and he's like, well, obviously Perseus was a whaler. Like, he's a cool dude. He must be a whaler.
Look at all these
cool
deities that have
Right?
talked about whales. Yeah.
But he references
so-
giant squid at some point as well, when they see what might be a whale, but it's actually a giant squid, so they leave it alone.
Okay, if you Google the word Leviathan, it says in biblical use, a sea monster identified in different passages with the whale and the crocodile, and then a very large aquatic creature, especially as a whale.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I feel like I was reading into it as a whale. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's often the way you see it interpreted, but I thought Melville was definitely... Like, he makes a bunch of allusions to giant squids at different times. And so I felt like, yeah, like he was trying to say, like, maybe it was a whale, but maybe it was the other aspect of the whale, which is the squid, because they talk about even the way that when the whales they pull up, they get killed, sometimes they'll puke out huge amounts of, like, tentacles and stuff. But at the same time, they'll pull up whales that have all these like tentacle suction cup marks on them as injuries.
Yep.
So there's clearly like some relationship between these two animals
Yep.
as like as dipoles of this I don't know, whale squid relationship.
Yeah.
There's another thought that I had. This is sort of unrelated, so we can wait if we want to still talk about Leviathans and such. But I had a thought that I was intrigued by, because I feel like I was resonating a lot of this story and like whaling in general with like modern day hunting, now that whaling is illegal. And so I was intrigued by, like, you know, people that are going off to Africa and trying to, you know, hunt, excuse me. I shouldn't use correct terms there. Hunt a tiger or whatever the case is, or I feel like I wanted some sort of like a comment from a modern day hunter on this. Like, I maybe should just do more research, but because I feel like it feels that way to me, like how sometimes like you kill a buck, you put the antlers on the wall, you know. That's essentially what they were doing with the jawbones. So I'm just intrigued by, I don't know, that juxtaposition maybe.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's definitely something that gets reinforced a bunch of times in this, is that they're killing these conspicuously intelligent animals.
The one thing I wanted to point out was in modern hunting, it gets a lot more confusing because there's effectively two types of hunters. There's people who hunt just to kill things and all that, and there's people who hunt and then use all of the meat and do
right, are using it as resources, like feeding them family and creating clothes, etc.
Right, you know, like there's different contexts for that. So I think it really depends, for sure.
Do you feel like the characters here, like, do we feel like the majority, like, I know we've established Ishmael, the majority of the reason he does whaling is because it's very profitable. Like, he does it, he gets paid very well for it. Great, good for him. But I'm curious, like, I don't know, I guess they're using a lot of the whales when they're using they eat a lot of the meat, they eat the brains, whatever. They use the milk, essentially, or to an extent, and they're using the oil. but is it like, I don't know if it, I feel like I want to know what was the justification, you know what I mean? Other than a job.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that they bring back from whales that is very valuable to the way that society worked at the time. They talk about oil a lot. Whale oil was literally lighting the country for a long time, or for a significant period during this time.
For like 100 years, or like 150 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like they were literally powering the entire country by themselves. There was no electricity. There was nothing like that. So like, this was it. This was the entire like light and energy producer for North America. Period.
Well, not just North America, but Western Europe as well, and like all of the industrial production that they had.
Because they would have been shipping a lot of it back to Europe.
Absolutely. And if you wanted to get finished goods from a factory, and you wanted that factory to run when the sun wasn't high in the sky, you needed something inside to run your lights, and that would have been whale oil.
Yep.
Because there was no other option. Like there was no electrical system at the time, not for another 75 years.
And they don't have the tools to like to pull up gasoline really or anything like that.
Oh, you don't pull up gasoline, you pull up crude oil, and while they could do that, they didn't have fractional distillation or whatever it's called, where you separate all the useful bits of the hydrocarbons out.
Yeah.
So yeah, they couldn't do that. There was no natural gas because, like, again, if you could dig this oil out of the ground, all that gas was going to escape. So there's no way to capture that. And like they had very few ways to have portable, high energy resources.
Yeah, and I was going to say the only other thing would be coal, but coal is almost as dangerous, to be honest, and more expensive.
Coal's way more dangerous
and kind of harder.
Well, the amount of stuff. Well, yeah, it's hard to burn a piece of coal, and it doesn't give off a lot of light. It gives off a lot of heat. But it also gives off a lot of carbon monoxide, which maybe they weren't explicitly aware of, but they knew that if you were in a closed room with a lot of burning coal, that you would be dead.
Yeah. But hey,
so
let's continue mining it. Woo!
Yeah.
Go America.
It did a lot of good.
It's clean coal, right? They wash it?
Yeah, you put it through the showers. So I'll take a drink.
Yeah.
Let's pour one out for our dead coal homies.
But yeah, I agree. I think it was a lot more equivalent to resource extraction with what Bojack's saying there, more so than it was hunting or anything like that.
Yeah, I get that. I guess, but I also know
what they thought of.
Like, if you were to guess what Queequeg wailed for, you know for a fact he does it for the thrill, right? Like that's what I've taken from his character, at least.
Actually, yeah, you know what? Because you're right. He totally does it because that's the way of life that he knows.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And partially because he likes showing off, like
right, absolutely. The testosterone that he gets from that, like he just, oh yeah, don't worry, I got this. Let me just drop into the ocean.
He's definitely a hold my beer, bro.
Hold my beer while I save this dude from 100 feet down in the ocean. Don't even worry.
But like, he hands Ishmael the spear, right? He like pulls the sword and like, here, hold this, and then jumps into the water.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
Yep.
Hold my spear, bro.
Yeah.
So Perfect. Definitely that type of guy.
Yeah, and so that's why I think Queequeg is the best character in this, because everything he does is understandable, and like, I don't know, man. Like, he's playing everyone else. I know that dude is. Like,
yeah,
I agree.
He's got one face that he presents to the white guys, and then like what he really is like.
So there's an interesting note in that story where he's telling in Spain about the kilt guy, Steel Kilt.
Oh yeah, Steel Kilt.
Steel Kilt.
Yeah.
And he mentions that he knows this Polynesian king at one point, and I'm pretty sure that's Queequeg, who's gone back home to get his rightful crown later on in life.
Man, that's actually totally possible.
Wait, why do you think that?
I never thought about that. Well, maybe, I mean, I don't think it was from the Steel Kilt story, but like...
Yeah, he made reference to it, though, in one of those weird, like, time jump things that he went on about, right? Like, where he was talking in a modern context of when he was writing that book.
Right, because there's those couple of moments where it kind of pulls back one narrative layer.
Yeah.
And describes the Okay, that's not what I thought that said in chat. For a second there,
What did you think he said?
I thought it said farts. It's like, wow, what?
Why would I do that?
I don't know.
Why would
I don't know. It's just like,
Okay.
Jesus, Erica, come on.
I'm just like trying
This
to
is a-
ruin the conversation if I do that. Come on.
Grown up
Alright, anyway.
stream. I'm 12 years old. Let me ruin it myself.
Okay.
Yep.
I appreciate
Yeah,
you.
so the Polynesian king. So it could be a reference to where Queequeg had come from. But there were a lot of like little kingdoms in the too much whale steak.
Sorry. I don't know.
Whale steak makes you real gassy. So yeah, I don't know,
Okay,
it
I'm
could have
okay.
been-
We're good. Whew.
It could have even been a
Okay.
reference to like the king of Hawaii, because there was a dude who, they ran that island chain,
Good point.
and that hadn't been taken over. Or it would have been just about taken over by the British at the time that this was written, I think, before it got jacked up by the Americans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Christmas whale steak for Christmas, delicious.
Christmas dinner idea. Yeah. Sounds good. I don't know where you're gonna get it though.
The ocean.
Yeah, right. Yeah, just go kill it. But you might as well head out right now because you got. It take you some time to get out there, get a crew
Those
together.
the Ottawa River whales. I'll just get one of those.
Yeah, right.
You just gotta head up the
We
coast.
call that a senator.
It's not actually all that far.
Do
What
they
is
carry
it?
those in Costco?
know.
Well, they have everything in bulk.
I
Half
did
a
have
whale
a question
carcass.
for you, Sam, and I need to do a bit more research on this. But would it historically be true that the story of Jonah is older than the story of Hercules?
That's a really good question. Probably. But they would have been.
Well, Hercules is Greek
I
mythology.
don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Hercules, like those both were around the couple thousand years BC-ish era.
Right.
Yeah. Well, according to Wikipedia, Jonah, if he really existed, would have been born in the 19th century BCE and died in the 8th century BCE.
Okay.
So
That makes sense.
about
So pre Jesus.
yeah,
Yes.
about
Yeah,
900
no, I
years
don't know.
before.
I think yes. I think it would have been older than the story of Hercules.
Interesting.
Probably. But it's also not impossible that they both originated from some root story and diverged, and or the Hercules story borrowed from that, because that happens a lot in mythology.
Yeah, well,
We'll
that's
have, like,
what
themes.
that's what Melville kind of states in that chapter where he's talking about the old school heroes who are definitely whalers because they're cool.
Right.
Because whalers are cool, in case you forgot.
I didn't forget. They're the coolest guys.
So you were saying like the story of Hercules and the whale is literally derived from the Hebrew story of Jonah and the whale, and I was curious if that was
Yeah.
historically accurate, or if maybe they would
Sounds
have
about right.
originated around a similar time. Because it's really hard to place the story of Greek mythology start right.
Yeah,
in
because if
general.
you would ask me outright, like my knowledge of like, I like Greek mythology a lot. I would immediately have assumed that it was, Hercules came first. But now because I am so, like far removed from like the Christian Bible that I'm like, I don't know. I think my lack of knowledge there I was a little biased. But
There's a lot of
Same.
stuff in the Old Testament, which is quite old.
Stittsville says Hercules is pre-Jonah.
Yeah, see, that's what I was curious
How
about.
do we know that?
Yeah.
I'm curious, just because I
That
feel like
doesn't sound correct.
my instincts would have guessed that, but I wasn't sure if it was my bias.
See,
That would be
I
a
do
face.
feel like that is a bit of a bias because there's two parts to the Bible, and one of them is extremely old, and one of them is not quite as old.
Right.
And the one that's not quite as old is definitely younger than the Greek, because it took place during the Roman era,
For sure.
after the Greeks, after the rise of the Roman Empire and all that jazz, right?
The problem with like the Old Testament is that it covers such a huge amount of time, and it's like this
Yeah.
kind of aggregated chunk of manuscripts over a long ass period. Anyway,
Yeah, and I agree
Yeah,
with what Bojack's
and-
saying. It's mostly based on older mythologies. They come from a lot of roots.
And both of them are though.
Yeah, both of them are.
Like the Greek ones are as well. They're and like, yeah. So it's real ambiguous. And like I said, the reality is they're probably both based on some third different root story.
Yeah, a monomyth.
Yeah, ish. Like, actually, you know what it is? It's the same story getting processed through the monomyth lens in two slightly different ways.
Right.
Where you get the same kind of structure applied to it with like diverging content. I don't know if that makes any sense.
No, I agree. I think that's a lot of the way in which that works, right?
Yeah.
I think I'm.
So-
oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
No, it's all good. Don't worry about it.
Okay, I was gonna say I want to touch on one last thing before we do our wrap up here.
Sure.
I want to talk about the last chapter, and whale society, and like the stuff that we see in that chapter, because it's pretty interesting and pretty different than what we see of the way whales are portrayed throughout the rest of the book.
Right.
How do you spell Joseph Campbell, by the way? Is it Campbell?
I believe so.
I don't know.
Yeah.
So hold on, I'm refreshing my brain. That was with the mothers and the baby whales, right? And then
the gigantic pod of whales. It's
Right,
like thousands of whales, horizon to horizon.
Mm-hmm.
I particularly thought that was interesting because they kind of come across it by accident. They see a whale initially, and they're like, "Oh, let's go kill and eat that whale."
Mm-hmm.
And then they kind of look up at the rest of the horizon and realize it's whales
All whales.
as far as they can see.
Right.
And they just sail straight into it, and they cross that threshold of like the thrashing whales at the outside. And he goes over like what that might be. And I don't understand. I wondered if you guys had any perspective on what you thought those whales were doing.
I didn't. I feel like I didn't understand that that's what he was trying to describe, because I remember the most. Maybe I feel like my comprehension level of this book is quite a bit lower than your guys's, but like
You're doing pretty good.
the thing that I remember most about reading in that chapter was just like Queequeg going over and like scratching the belly of one of the baby whales.
Yes.
I was like, okay, this is adorable. And then all of a sudden they were like, all right, we're completely trapped. This is cool. And that's all. I sort of like, I think I missed any reference of thrashing whales. I remember them talking about coming up for the spouting, what's the action?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's spouting.
Yeah,
Oh,
spouting
okay,
is
yeah.
accurate.
Okay. Yeah, I remember them talking about that they were just like spouting a lot, and they just saw one whale after another spouting. But that's all I.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, so-
I
Night-
may have
Go
messed
ahead.
up and only read to the end of chapter 84 because I misread the message I got.
What do you mean misread the message you got?
Yeah, I asked both of you and I misread both of them.
How is that possible?
He's what the fuck, Brendan?
Oops.
That's a lie.
You had an
That's a
extra
lie.
damn day.
No,
Can
I
we
just didn't know.
please? He goes, what?
Son of a bitch.
He fucking asked me. I said 87. He goes, all right,
Same.
thank you. Actually, he typoed saying thank you. He wrote YU when he meant to say TY and then said TY after.
Oops.
Jesus Christ, Brendan.
Yeah. No. The worst part of this is that I intentionally included the chapter title so that he'd know, even if the number was wrong.
Well, la-di-da, Brendan. Way to go.
Oopsies.
Oh man, man? Okay, so this is the best part of this entire section is this whale pod thing, because like, man, you got to read this, Brendan. What the hell?
It's just spelled Jesus fucking Christ. Oh, I love your mom. She's the best. Oh.
And yes, 87 is the world's longest chapter, but it's really intense. Maybe
It wasn't
we'll
that
actually
bad.
save. I thought it was really neat. Maybe we'll save the discussion for next time when
Yeah.
Brendan, and we'll use that as a starter.
Yeah, we could do that.
I'm only 2 chapters off, guys. I'm sorry.
Okay, but it's neat, and I want to touch on that
I was all
because
proud of myself for getting it done on time. Jesus.
I thought it was a really, because it touches on the discussion we had about like what they know about whales, and I thought this one was actually an instance of showing that
That they were learning something new.
they were learning a bunch of
Yeah.
stuff new, but that also like the information that they thought they knew isn't necessarily as accurate as they believe it to be.
Not gospel, yeah.
Yeah, so when they roll up into this whale thing, they're like, oh my god, look at these baby whales, and they're just like baby people. They've got the description that I loved was the crazy look that babies have when they're like breastfeeding. They'll be drinking, and then they're looking at you with these eyes.
Yeah, and then he was like,
"Who are you,
yeah,
man?"
he was like, it looks like he's looking at me, but he's actually not looking at me.
So
yeah, that was
there's a lot, not having read this chapter, but there's a lot of references in the previous chapters to stuff that we now know is what makes a whale a mammal. And the whole thing with breastfeeding and all that is a big part of that, but also when he talks about how whales are weird because they have warm blood despite being fish, and like oxygenated blood and having to breathe, and like all this different things that are really intriguing. Of you kind of see the science start to come together, right? Where they're starting to see that effect of, hey, maybe whales aren't fish after all.
Yeah.
I thought that was kind of the point of him saying that in the very first discussion of it, where he makes a big point of being like, yeah, but they're fish, whatever. I thought it was kind of an ironic statement of, like, here's all this information that proved me wrong, but I'm gonna pretend like it's like I'm right anyway. And then we keep getting presented with more of that information proving him wronger and wronger.
Isn't that true of a lot of the things that he thinks about people?
Yeah, well, and I guess what I'm trying to say is that I think he's presenting it so that we can see and acknowledge that those things are wrong.
Yeah.
Like, he knows that they're incorrect and he's presenting them anyway so that we will learn from it.
I mean, it's pretty logical in that sense, because if he didn't want it to come across that way, he probably would have edited it out of the book, no?
Well, he left in all those fucking whale chapters, so...
Yeah, I mean, it's like, I don't know. I feel like if he were really worried about coming across as wrong, he probably would have edited pieces to make him seem more right.
Depends. He might have been getting paid by the word. That was a 19th century thing.
Good point. That's a good point.
Yes.
Yeah, so okay.
They have respect for the whale and fear for the whale.
Absolutely.
And a lot of other things for the whale, too. Because they're whalers, and they're the most badass things on the earth. They're really cool guys, in case you forgot.
They can fight dragons, but dragons are actually whales, so, you know.
Dragons are actually whales. Yeah. I'm looking...
True fact.
His reasoning for that was super legit, though. I was really impressed.
Yeah, I think that. No, I agree that he backed it up very well. I agree. I just think it's funny to me. I'm like, man, never in my life have I thought whales were badass. I just thought they were enormous and large.
Thing is like one of the most powerful images from my childhood, having read like Merlin books, and like I have a puzzle downstairs that's literally like all of the fictional places of the pre-modern world. So it's like. God, what's part of it, like Xanadu and the Lost City of Gold and like all that kind of stuff, right? And it literally has that sort of here be dragons and pictures of whales on it on the map in the water. Like that's such a thing that they did.
Totally. And like, remember when we were reading through what was that? Something called Hominids. Sapiens, excuse me, and there was that whole chapter on the change between the time period when, you know, they just fill in the unknown parts of the map with here be dragons versus that later 19th century era where there were empty parts of the map.
Right.
And I feel like right at the period that we're in this book is where it's transitioning over to a more like a willingness to admit the unknown. Because a lot of what Melville talks about is how much they aren't sure about.
Yeah, and you got kind of explorers traveling the world to see what's out there and like all kinds of stuff like that, right? Like, because they've discovered North America and they've discovered South America. European society has, and you know they're traveling to the Orient all the time, and like they've just discovered so many more things. They reference Polynesia and Malaysia, and
and they're in constant contact, and the whalers are now. Breaking new ground with these Polynesian and Pacific Islander cultures.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really interesting, and I guess we're going to get more into that in the third part, because now they're into like the real deep Pacific, like actually off the China Sea and the Sea of Japan. So I think there's going to be a lot of interesting stuff going on there.
Mhm.
They don't really have a lot of contact with the people on the shore, so I don't know if we'll get much cultural exchange that way. But there's certainly a lot of sailors there
It'd be
already.
interesting to see some Chinese and Japanese whalers in the third part. Because I
Uh-huh.
know the Japanese whaling industry was really big for a long time, even after the American industry was shut down.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there's still, I mean, there's that, what the hell's that show? There was that's the show that ran for such a long time on the Discovery
Whale
Channel.
Wars or whatever it was
Yeah,
called.
Whale Wars. Yeah, where it's basically American sailors trying to stop Japanese whalers from killing whales.
That's
So-
God, what is that guy's name? He's actually Canadian, the guy who runs that.
I'm not sure. I can't recall, but because it went off air in like 2012, I think. But
He got arrested, and there was like a big. Anyway, yeah, that you're right. That is exactly this subject. Is him, that guy, that friggin' activist whose name I can't remember.
Paul Watson,
Paul Watson. Thank you.
he is Canadian. He's from
fighting-
Toronto.
Fighting against the whale industry, and like he'll mount these giant sharpened chunks of rebar on the front of his boat and slice open enemy, or in his perceived
ships,
world,
yeah.
enemy whalers.
exactly, which I find so intriguing now. Like learning more because I'm learning more about the history of whaling. I'm finding it more intriguing that I sort of maybe want to go watch like an episode or two.
Well, it lends a lot of credence to his position because
Mm-hmm.
whaling is pretty brutal.
Totally,
Yeah.
as we've learned.
Yep.
Yeah. So okay, as a wrap up, let's talk about. Did we have what were our general opinions of this particular part?
I liked a lot of the stuff when he was talking about. I actually really liked the sort of weird other story tangents about random characters. I kind of like that stuff. I thought that was more interesting because it had like a plot than some of the other parts. And I was very intrigued when he was talking about anything to do with mythology and or art and depictions of whales. Even the sort of breakdown of what books of whaling are good and which ones are bad. I thought that was kind of
Yes.
intriguing analysis of historical context. So I enjoyed this part. So I enjoyed about half of this, kind of in the same way I enjoyed half of the first part, where there's a lot of good stuff, but there was some really boring stuff that I glossed over, where he's just talking about random philosophy junk that I didn't care about. But his turn of phrase is excellent. So
Yeah,
Erica, do you have a
I mean, I was pretty opinionated earlier. I think I definitely liked the first part better. I think I was more attached to learning about Ishmael going through, a normal plot line and like hearing the story rather than like because I think I got attached to that the first bit, and so the fact that we had to I sat through more textbook nonfiction type chapters. I guess it was intriguing. It was, and I like learning, but I think that I set myself up for one thing and then got another in this section. And so I'm hoping, I'm excited for the anticipation of the third section where maybe we meet a Moby Dick and we see Ahab go a little bit more crazy. I'm
Yeah.
more excited for that.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that is going to be pretty great. And I'm kind of in the same boat. There's some pretty neat on-ship stuff going on here. There's some pretty interesting like sailing facts. The thing that I took away that I thought that was completely baffling was the idea that they like never go to port because these ships don't have any cargo. They just fill themselves with water
Right.
and roll around for like years at a time. That I didn't get. So I've been finding some of the like more logistical parts interesting, if
Yeah.
not like really engaging. But yeah, I enjoyed this part, and it was less boring than I anticipated based on stuff I had read about, like overall summaries where like allegedly the middle of the book is very dry. But it's about 50-50 so far. And I'm totally waiting for that total lunatic insanity at the end.
So I kind of wonder, because the boring part was kind of the end of that first third and the beginning of this second third, and then once he starts getting into some other stuff, it gets more interesting. But So I'm wondering if, like, when people talk about the middle of the book, they're specifically referring to that section that's kind of like 40% in, because it's like just at the 33% mark, but it's a little before the halfway point, sort of thing. That part being really boring, because that was the part that I found really boring.
Yep. Yeah. Same here. So I think maybe that's what they were talking about. And, you know, that's good because it means that we're into the really good part now.
Yeah.
Good to know.
Well, we'll definitely start seeing ramping up, right? Like, we've kind of already started to see a lot more about
I think the
Ahab and
Armada
how
chapter,
Ahab is good, like what Ahab does and why he's interesting. A lot more. Like, I felt better about who he was in this part.
You know, I didn't even think of it until just now, but like when they're, well, Brendan, you didn't get there, but like when they're going through that strait between, what do you call it, Java
and Sumatra.
He talks about it being this giant gate, like the Pillars of Hercules, like the gates between the Mediterranean and the Atlantic. And I didn't even
Gibraltar.
With the Straits of Gibraltar, but it's them passing through this gate into the new phase.
Yeah.
Of the whale journey. So obvious now.
Right. It was a huge opener for an action.
It's Act 3. It's Act 3 of the entire story. So I think that's going to be really interesting as we finish out the book for next time. For those of us, or for those of you out there reading along with us, like I said, we're going to be reading up to the end of the book. We're going to finish out Moby Dick. We want to be done that for Monday, the 11th of December. It's our projected next episode date, possibly the 18th, but like at that point, it's pretty late in December. So
that'll
keep
be
tuned
our last episode for the year.
Yep, and we'll figure out. We'll keep you posted for what's happening in the new year.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't particularly have a plan yet. We have a couple potential guests.
I have a plan to actually read with you guys now.
Awesome.
now that I've guested, I'm like more intrigued and motivated, I think.
And if you want to keep coming back, and this is something that I would offer to our other guests as well, is that if you want to keep coming back and reading along, obviously you're totally welcome to do that.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Because you've contributed quite a lot to the conversation, so I think it'd be good. So does anyone have any...
That was so sweet. She wants me on every time, I'm full of entertainment. It's just, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. So did anyone have any closing thoughts before we head out for the evening?
This book is better than I thought it would be, to be honest.
Ditto.
I thought it was going to be a lot more trudging than it really is.
Yep. I definitely feel that there is, aside from the academic segments, there's a lot more interesting stuff going on than I anticipated as well.
I actually really like the academic segments as well, though. Like, they're not... Other than that first one, which was kind of just like a taxonomy, the newer ones are more interesting. When he talks about specific aspects and specific things, I thought were a lot more interesting.
I feel like there's a better way to integrate them. And I don't know exactly what that is, but it's good. It's overall, it is, I agree that it's much better than I anticipated.
Yeah. Much
more engaging. So I don't know. Again, unless there's
recommendations, then
okay. If you want to do some recommendations, we can do that. I am just going to go ahead and shout mine out initially, or right off the top here. I haven't read it yet, but Andy Weir's new book, Artemis, came out.
Cool.
Martian was good. I'm intrigued.
Yeah, Martian was amazing. So actually, I don't know. It's not impossible. We may do that book for a book club book.
I'm into it.
Yeah, we'll talk about it.
Brendan's like, let's talk about it.
Oh shit, yeah. So I don't know. You guys got anything to shout out?
I've been really enjoying the Netflix space adaptation of Van Helsing based on the Zenescope graphic novel. It's a very cool horror show in that way that I don't know if you ever watched the Constantine adaptation.
The movie?
No, the show, not the movie. The movie's completely
separate. I did not
separate.
watch the show.
Yeah, the show was pretty accurate to the comic, and it was really nice because it felt like a horror movie without feeling like a tropey horror movie. Like, you know what I mean? And I feel like this show is very similar. Like, it does a really good job of setting the scene really interesting characters, good real interesting conflicts, like interpersonal conflicts, and like more bigger on the problem scale of the world conflicts. And then yeah, just like pretty awesome, like good, really good art and prop team sort of thing. Like really got the feel down right. The effects are not amazing, but they're not the worst I've ever seen either. So yeah, I think it's a good show. It's really interesting if you're looking for something a little more genre. Oh, and we watched Alien.
Sounds like a good watch. Yeah, and Alien.
Alien.
Oh, Alien. Yeah, we watched Alien. I thought it's not my kind of movie. I'm not into it, but that's just because it's me. I don't know. I watched Jessica Jones. Been Jessica Jones. All about it. She's my app. It's my to be honest, I'm a little biased, but it's my favorite Marvel Netflix so far. But I haven't watched many yet, so I will be.
You are not
binging
wrong.
all of them in a lot way. Yeah, maybe some of us, some of us that only maybe made it to episode 9 should probably finish watching it.
Yeah, Brendan. What?
Legitimately.
I still think it's
Jessica
amazing.
Jones is amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so good, and all I wanted to do was when I finished was go to Brendan and be like, I was in love with this character, and then he couldn't even comment on it because he didn't.
How could you
want
not
to
finish that?
I lost my momentum and some stuff happened that I was traveling and stuff, and like it just didn't work
Bullshit.
out. What do you mean? I went to Montreal.
You're watching Van Helsing right now. You could have watched Jessica Jones.
Yeah, but I gotta start it again from the beginning.
Oh, really?
Oh my god. All right.
Anyway.
You know what?
Yeah.
On that, we're gonna say goodnight.
Yeah.
Thank you everyone in chat for contributing. We always appreciate you being here. Even if you're just here. And thank you, Erica, for guesting, and Brendan for co-hosting as usual. So thank you and good night.
All right.
Night, guys.
Night, everyone.